So, hey, Ingrid, co-founder of Ludenso. If you could start by introducing yourself, please.
Yeah, hi, very nice to meet you. I'm one of the founders of Ludenso, and I'm the CMO of the company, meaning that I'm working to get our technologies in the hands of students. And yeah, really happy to be here.
And just tell me a little bit, like a brief summary about Ludenso as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so we work to make learning more engaging and inclusive. And we do so by bringing traditional textbooks to life so that you can utilize the curated high quality content from publishers while getting the modern flavor and the more fun aspect of it through augmented reality and 3D enhanced content.
And how was your educational experience through school and university? How did you find it?
I really enjoyed learning. I guess I was a bit of an overachiever in my early years, having parents with academic careers and who, well, introduced me to school as sort of a tool to open doors to create the future that you want. And so when I was younger, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I did science subjects to get into university and do mechanical engineering, which I did at the Technical University of Trondheim, which is one of the technical universities in Norway. And then I did that because I wanted to create products. I wanted to prototype. I wanted to see what happens when you bring an idea to life. And I guess during my studies, I started realizing that the type of products that we were making would be something someone else would decide what would be. Like we were doing projects on creating electrical bicycles and we were making lamps to use in cabins, and I made a lemon juicer and lots of fun projects. But I wanted to see, well, what happens if I decide on the idea? Because when I go into work life, as for instance a consultant, I would be working on projects where I wouldn't have that chance to sort of decide on why we were building a product. So I swapped my master's into entrepreneurship and did a master's in entrepreneurship at NTNU, where I had the opportunity to take courses at Boston University. So I actually moved to the US to do a course there. And then I met my to be advisor at Babson College while I was there. So I actually got to write my thesis on gender differences in entrepreneurship, as women get a lot less funding than male founders do. So I moved to Boston to interview entrepreneurs and investors and sort of be able to sit in the back of meetings and watch as entrepreneurs were pitching and listen to the questions they were asked by investors and so on. So quite a different master thesis than I thought I would be going into as an 18-year-old when I started doing mechanical engineering. But it led me to where I am now, working in a startup. So yeah, fun journey.
And it sounds like you like to be able to create products and bring things to life. What was like the first thing you can remember creating or building, whether it's a product or a business?
I think perhaps that could have been like we made this huge bicycle with more than 300 parts that we put everything together, and it was like an ambulance bicycle. Horrible business idea, but the idea was that it would, in areas where you couldn't drive an ambulance, you would be able to bike and pick up children. So it had like this kind of almost like a box where you could place the sick child in it and then bike really fast to the hospital. This is what happens when you put a lot of mechanical engineers on a creative project. It was super fun, and I think the bike went up to 60 kilometers an hour. So we were like bicycling really fast at the university campus. But yeah, no, it was a fun experience learning 3D modeling in NX and just working in a team. But not an idea I would probably bring to the next step.
How beneficial is a master's in entrepreneurship towards becoming an entrepreneur?
So that's a fun question. So I think in Trondheim, where I did my 2-year study in collaboration with those two American universities, I got very practical hands-on education. So I tried to start a company that was doing desalination of seawater using wave energy when I was studying. So we basically teamed up with other students in my class and tried to build the company. And then we used all the different courses and the theory in entrepreneurship to sort of learn, well, how to create a business plan. What is a business plan? Using Osterwalder and like those big names that you're supposed to know in entrepreneurship. but also getting those sort of being out in the field, trying to sell, trying to pitch to investors. And so it was really hands-on. And my company during my studies didn't really work for me, but it was a great experience because it taught me kind of what was important when I was going to do my next venture.
What was the company during your studies?
It was called Ocean Oasis, and it was like this buoy that you would have offshore that would have like a pump system that would allow you to create seawater using reverse osmosis. So a really, really technical project that we were doing with senior technologists from DNV, which is a huge industry company here in Norway. And the company exists today. I just didn't end up working there it wasn't a good fit for me, but the company is still, I think they're doing really well. But yeah.
So it sounds like you got some really hands-on practical experience being able to start a company whilst at university, and I assume that helped you a lot towards the company you're building now.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think like doing it during university, there's less risks. Like when you're in your early teens, you don't have all those responsibilities. Like now I'm married and I have a house and I have a baby, and like now I have a lot of responsibilities. And for me now it would be a hard time to take that leap and dare to jump on an idea and just go for it. But as a student, when you need to get that early experience, I think that was a fantastic timing, being in an environment with so many people wanting to make a change and you didn't really have much risk. So I think that was, yeah, really, really fun time. And it taught me about the importance of working alongside people you really enjoy being with. Like my co-founders now, Eirik and Harold, they're fantastic humans. Like I feel so lucky every single day to be working with them because they're not just talented and smart and creative, but they're also just really friendly and fun and curious people that I enjoy being together with. And that's something that I think is important when starting a company.
And would you say that's one of the most important things with a co-founder, is not just the talent and the ability, like you say, is the being a good person because you're spending a lot of time with them?
Yeah, I think so, because like I know they compare it to a marriage, and in many ways I can understand why. Like you spend so much time together and it's through highs and lows and you have conflict and you need to have like that psychological safety where you can disagree and you can jump ideas, and if you don't really have that safety there, then the collaboration is not going to be as fruitful and productive as it could be. And not everyone cares about having fun at work, but I love coming in and like we have jokes and we do social events and we have beers and we go to tons of conferences together, and then it's also like it's just fun. Like I really enjoy it and we laugh a lot together. So
Yeah, that definitely makes working better if you can enjoy it.
yeah.
And you said you've got a husband and child. That sounds quite the challenge, as well as running a startup. Like I run my own thing and I find it difficult not having these responsibilities. So how do you manage to balance it all?
I think, to be honest, that my team took a big hit during my pregnancy because I wasn't feeling that well throughout the entire pregnancy, and so I had to take partial sick leave, which was a bit of like not an identity crisis, but for someone who's like close to a workaholic, like I really enjoy working and then suddenly you can't do it as much. It was very challenging, and also for the team, like they had to take on some of my responsibilities and we had someone else come into the team and take on parts of my job, and then I had to sort of transfer a lot of the tacit knowledge and the connections that I have to make others able to help me properly. So yeah, no, it was definitely a big change for the entire team to make that work. And now coming back, I've been away for a few months and it's just so much that happened on the technology side. So just getting on top of everything has been a very fun and big challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine, like, if somebody took a pregnancy, say 10 years ago, 9 months was a long time, but I'm just thinking now of like taking some time off, and the amount that things like AI advance, like I've seen tools like Complexity and ChatGPT advance in 1 month
Yeah.
what should be like 12 months of work. So I can imagine things that it must be crazy. It's almost like missing 10 years in this day and age.
Yeah, no, it definitely feels like that. But that's also why I didn't like completely log off completely. So I was coming down to the office. I would have chats with the team. I would join like when we had investor gatherings or workshops. I would just bring the baby and sit there and kind of join whatever I had the capacity to join. And so I did try to stay on top of what was moving so that it wasn't all too big of a shock to join the team again. But definitely lots happening on the technology side. Never seen things move as quickly as they have been doing now.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
No, I don't think I did. I come from a long line of doctors, so I think a lot of people were expecting me to enter the medical field. But my mom was an engineer or a chemist from NTNU, so the same university I went to. So I definitely had role models very close to me who were interested in science and who showed me the opportunities. And then I think the first time someone sort of hinted to me that maybe entrepreneurship would be a nice field for me was I was head of this voluntary organization with 700 members, and I just had lots of energy and was leading like 20 different subgroups, and we were doing everything from hikes and parties to industry events to lots of things happening at the university. And then one other person in charge, so this was the mechanical engineering students, and then someone else from the School of Entrepreneurship was like, have you thought of entrepreneurship? Like, have you thought of swapping your master's into a different field? Like, I think you would be really good for joining a startup. I was like, no, haven't thought of it. And then it went like 3 years before I actually pursued it. Like, I just had it in back of mind and then continued to sort of develop my technical skills and technical understanding and using more of the analytical side. And then I kind of missed more of the creative and impact part of it, which kind of then pushed me over to joining the master's program in entrepreneurship and trying something myself.
And what made you start Ludenso?
Yeah, so when I had finished my master's, I met Eirik and Harold, my co-founders, and they were running this AR/VR hardware company called Movie Mask, which is now driven by some other people, and it's called Immerse Optics, if you're curious to check it out. But it was like this immersive tech company that they pitched to me in such a fun and energizing way that I was like, I have to jump on this, I have to join this. And we did a fairly successful Kickstarter, and like it seemed to be moving in the right direction. And this was before Magic Leap had crashed and burned, and like there was a lot of hype around the potential of AR hardware. But then when we launched, we saw that people were buying from a ton of different industries. And normally what you want to do is to sort of find your beachhead market and really succeed there and then expand. And for us, it was hard to see, okay, we have people from the oil sector and we have architects and we have people doing gaming and like we have so many different use cases. Like how do we choose a direction from here? And so, sort of by chance, we were invited to a classroom where a teacher and her students were using these AR headsets to explore creations in 3D in the schoolyard and contrast to all the people we've met at Equinor or Spacemaker or those companies. These children were just super enthusiastic and they were running around and just showing a lot of engagement and asking tons of questions and just they treated the technology so naturally. And the teacher was also like, wow, I've never seen him this engaged before. Like, wow, she's really so much more active now than she normally is in a traditional lesson. Like, we just got that taste of what kind of impact you could make for young learners. And then fast forward some months, we decided basically to sort of not go with the headsets because selling it to schools would be really hard. The teachers didn't want to touch them, and there was very little pedagogical content there. But we saw that, okay, we have a lot of expertise within AR, and we know that this can really help learners. So what we did then was we started Ludenso, and we teamed up with someone we knew had the pedagogical context and content, and also distributions to the students, which was the publisher. So that's how we kind of started out with Ludenso and bringing textbooks to life. Does that make sense?
It does, it does. Sounds incredibly impactful. However, these sort of businesses are quite difficult to start, obviously, because you obviously know EdTech's a difficult field. So how did you navigate that?
Yeah, so I remember making the shift from sort of hardware consumer to software to the education field. Our investors were like, you know that starting a company is a marathon, and if you want to do EdTech, that's an ultra marathon. And
Good way of
so
saying it.
I think we were just like, well, challenge accepted. Let's do it. Like, if it's that hard, then maybe others won't be trying, and that's an advantage to us.
And how's it going so far, and how has it gone?
Yeah, no, it's going great. It's really fun. I think some parts of the challenges in the industry is that it's sort of moving really slowly and really fast at the same time. Like, we see students now using ChatGPT almost on a daily basis. And then you have the publishers who are sort of trying to navigate how to stay on top and stay relevant and utilize their quality content and their distribution channels to sort of continue to make the impact that they want to while still being relevant. And so it's a really fun place to be right now because there's so much happening with these big industry leaders and on the technology side.
And your target customer is the school, if I understand correctly.
No, so we sell to publishers, and then when the publishers use our technology and they bring their books to life using AR and 3D, then they sell more, basically. So they're the one getting the technology into the hands of students, and then we help the publishers succeed at that. So we help them with sort of best practices in how to do it in sales conferences, how to speak to teachers, newsletters, and so on. But we now work with more than 30 publishers and have students across 150 countries using our technologies. And we're only a small team of 7 people at the moment. So being able to do that is, I think, something we do by tapping into the strengths of the publishers. Like, they have big marketing departments and they have really experts in creating content, and so we just sort of had to figure out how do we tap into that in a way that makes it easy for them to use our tech and to sort of bring more value to their end users.
How did you get into so many countries?
Well, we had
That
sort
through
of
the
a blessing.
publishers?
Yeah. So we had a blessing in disguise because when we started working with our first publishing partner, this was a Norwegian publishing house, and they wanted exclusivity. And we were just like, okay, our first customer, let's say yes to whatever they want. Let's just do it to get started. And then obviously after we started working, we're like, oh no, that was probably bad. No, we can't work with anyone else here. But that kind of forced us to look abroad. And our second customer was a UK publisher called PG Online, who dared to take a chance on us very early on, which we're super grateful for. And that kind of sort of quality stamp allowed us to raise our seed round because we said, okay, now we have our first big customer here. We see a lot of engagement with the Norwegian students, and we now know we have people in the US wanting to pay for this and continue working on it. And so after that, we teamed up with Cambridge University Press, and thanks to that, we got a very nice press article, and Cambridge wrote about the partnership on their websites. And then that made it just so much easier to do the other dialogues we were having in parallel with other publishers, because they all kind of, I guess, they get pitched by startups every single day on tons of different technologies. And so ultimately it comes down to trust and quality. And by having those big brand names and being out in the market, we, I think, managed to sort of pass through both of those.
PG took a chance on you. What was it that made you different? Why did they take a chance on you, do you think?
I'm guessing kind of just the enthusiasm and the willingness to learn and the kind of dialogue we had. So it was more of a partnership rather than just us saying, here's the perfect solution, you just go ahead with it. It was much more sort of a collaboration. And this was a fun trick, I guess. Like, we did a webinar where we called it The Future of Textbooks. And if you're in publishing and there's a ton of things happening, you want to know what the future of textbooks is. And we didn't really have sort of the expertise to be able to hold such a webinar, really. Like, we'd only been in the industry for some months. But we talked about what we thought would be the future of textbooks, and we had lots of people coming to listen to this. And so I think that kind of just gave them an early flavor and a live demo of what it was, and then people got interested from that. And then we just continued doing the Future of Textbook webinars, and we even did a Future of Textbook Summit where we did like a cabin trip where we invited lots of publishing leaders and the education minister of Portugal and so on to learn from each other in a relaxed, authentic setting in a cabin where we did like real fireside chats by the fire and cooked. And just think what we've done is that we've been really good at nurturing relationships and treating people with respect and not doing like tons of mass outreach that's automated by AI. Like we rather want to have the right partners and have meaningful relationships, and then get the sales through kind of partnership discussions where we know the people we're working with, so that we're able to provide them with technology that actually meets their needs.
It seems like it requires a lot of education in the sense that you've got to educate people about the future of textbooks. Like, I'm imagining there's a lot of people who don't know what's possible.
Yeah, but they all care deeply. Like, some of these publishers have their own innovation departments, right? And so, like, I talked to a publisher last week, and they had done this workshop on AI, and they had come down to about 200 different use cases that they could utilize the technology for. And they don't have that large tech teams, so they're like overwhelmed by opportunities. They know the change is happening right now, but they're like, how to prioritize, what should they build, what should they buy, and then helping them navigate by being the tech expert that we are and allowing them to be the content experts that they are. We kind of, I think, build a nice bridge, and we help educate them not only by sharing our perspectives, but actually like bringing in different industry leaders to share their thoughts. So we do blog posts and webinars and events where they can speak and meet across countries and learn from each other, so that it's more of a authentic dialogue.
And what you've built is quite complex compared to a lot of other businesses. How did you go around building this in the early stages?
Well, in the early stages, it was quite duct taped. With the first clients, we had these huge Excel sheets where they would literally just write, like, on page 19, I want to have a 3D model in AR of a beating heart or the inside of an eye or a volcano erupting. And then we and our developers would go back, do the hard coding, and then it took time for it to go live. And then after 2 weeks, we would come back and show them, like, here, now it works. And they're like, no, I didn't really mean it like that. I want it bigger. I want it positioned on that part of the page, blah, blah, blah. And we had to go back and iterate. And during this process, we kind of learned that the creative power shouldn't be in our hands. It should be with the experts in science or anatomy or geography. Like, if we could make a drag and drop tool with no code that would allow them to bring their own books to life, then we could empower lots of editors and authors to sort of supercharge their learning materials and add it into their workflow without adding too much work, while reducing the complexity and sort of not becoming a consultancy firm, but rather being a tech company building a platform for them. So that's how we made sort of our editorial part of the product, which is only available to publishers. And then based on what's being created there, the student get access to the resources through their phones or tablets or, Chromebooks and so on.
And you're currently the CMO. What made you decide to be the CMO? Is marketing your favorite, or would you say that's your strongest skill set?
It's a fun question. Like, at university, I always did lots of like voluntary work, and I remember taking on the role as kind of a CMO of a student festival with more than 2,000 participants doing different sports. And so I led an organization I grew the organization from 7 people to 450 in less than a year, and led 20 people in the marketing team with 5 different subgroups. And this is something I did in parallel to studying. And I really enjoyed the creative part of it and sort of also the analytical side of it. So when I met Eirik and Harold, I remember I asked them, because they wanted me to join their startup. And I'm like, what do you really need? And they're like, we need someone in marketing. I'm like, well, I have a mechanical engineering background. I also did marketing a little bit, but if you want me as the CMO in this company, then you need to allow me to learn. And they're like, yeah, okay, if you have the right mindset and the like willingness to put the work that goes into it, then okay, let's try it out. So the first thing I did was I connected with a CMO that I really admire, and I just asked her, like, what do you do? Like, how do you run your company? Because they were also doing hardware technologies. So this was when we did the Kickstarter of the AR headsets. And she just invited me to stay with her for a week, like literally in her home. And I followed her to work every single day and just looked at, like, what is she doing? How does she structure her day? What kind of meetings is she having? Like, how does she set goals? Like, what does she do? And then I kind of just built up mentorships. I wouldn't call it mentorships maybe, but like friendships with people interested in marketing. And I just learned from other talented people, like people from Remarkable, like creating this paper tablet. They're based in Norway. They would set aside time for me to just sort of sit down and learn how to do it their way. And then I would kind of just learn from different people and connected with more and more people in the education industry. And now as a CMO, I do lots of marketing, but I also do a lot of sales dialogues, and I go into classrooms and I talk directly with students and teachers. So I'm still getting to use some of the experience from product development in mechanical engineering. So I think it's a fun bridge kind of between the more engineering approach to things and the creative side of marketing, where I get to speak to lots of interesting, knowledgeable people in the publishing and education industry. So yeah, no, I really enjoy being in the space I am, and I've made the position into what I wanted it to be. So it's probably not like if you Google CMO, it may not be exactly what my day looked like.
Yeah, I guess these sort of positions can be different at every company.
Yeah.
So it seems you get to use both the creative and the analytical side of your brain in marketing.
Yeah.
And what's the thing or marketing strategy or marketing method that you've most enjoyed doing? It can be at your current company or anywhere else.
Yeah, no, so we've tried a lot of different things. And I think for us, what stood out is that when you'd want to do B2B SaaS enterprise with long sales cycles, like it is in publishing, having the trust and the relationship is key. And you build that by having in-person meetings, actually shaking someone's hand, keeping people updated on the technology and on your team and what you're doing, and making them feel connected to the problems you're solving. And so for us, going to conferences has been really important. Like that's where we meet both our existing partners, but also new potential clients. So conferences has been key, and it's something I really enjoy. Like it's very fun to meet people who care about the same things. And then we do something we refer to as partner marketing, where it's more about seeing, okay, if we want students, let's say in Sweden, to have access to our AR app and make this partnership with Natur and Kultur, our partner there, succeed, then how do we do that? And then we've helped the publisher with creating guides for teachers and onboarding guides, and we're helping them on a conference now, like how can you best pitch this very quickly in a sales stand? Like how do you empower your sales team to share kind of the key values of using AR and 3D in learning? So yeah, just making sure that we tap into those resources that the publishers have and we help them succeed. I think that's a fun part of the marketing job. And also we don't have the capacity, to go into all the different schools in Greece and in Italy and in Portugal and so on. So we need to figure out how can we get the publishers to succeed with it on our behalf.
And conferences, what's your strategy for that? Do you go as an exhibitor or do you just visit and make connections or?
Yeah, we just visit mostly. So we typically start booking meetings a few weeks in advance, and it's typically like 30-minute slots. So this is often where the publishers are making the big decisions. It's for us London Book Fair, which is coming up soon, and then it's Frankfurt Book Fair. Those are the two main events. And so it's about prepping well, having the right demos at hand so that you have efficient meetings, having the right questions to ask so that we figure out what we need to figure out from each individual conversation. So lots of prepping goes into these conferences. And then it's, of course, all the work that goes into following up after.
How is it building a startup in Norway? Because Norway's a startup ecosystem I know very little about.
Well, it's a small community for good and bad. I'm not going to say everyone knows everyone, but it's still a bit like, maybe a bit like that. We started sitting at sort of an incubator or accelerator space called Startup Lab, which is the most famous one we have here, which was amazing because they connected us to industry leaders, investors, other entrepreneurs. Like Kahoot is one of the unicorns that's come out of Norway. They used to sit at Startup Lab, and one of their founders was the first investor in Ludenso. And so being connected through these communities has been very helpful. And then based on, I don't know, networking events that's being hosted here, we've got in touch with Third, which is a big family office that cares deeply about social entrepreneurship and impact that you can make in education and for underserved students. And so those are our biggest owners now. We had them on board in our seed round. And so I think like the fact that it's so tightly knit here in Norway makes it's a very short step sort of in the network to go from talking to someone to talking to the people you really need to know. But if someone does something wrong, I guess it's sort of something that would spread easily. So it's sort of, there's a high trust society overall, and that also works in the startup community. And it's very much like one thing I should highlight is I really love that there's like a pay it forward type of community. Like when I started out, as I told you, asked other CMOs, like, what do you do in your job? Like, how do you set goals? What are your main advice for us at our stage? So when people ask me now, like, if I can sit down with them and help them, I don't expect anything in return. It's just kind of the culture here. So I'm like, of course, yeah, I'll be happy to take a coffee and share some practical advice or give you feedback. So I think it really, I really enjoy the pay it forward culture that's here in Oslo.
That's great. And you touched on community, and I see you're a member of the Female EdTech Fellowship as well. Like, how important is community for yourself and for entrepreneurs in general, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really important. Sometimes, especially if you're having some bumps in the road or something feels hard or you feel a bit lost, it's very nice to meet people and understand that you're not alone. Or for me, like with the Female EdTech Fellowship, I've never really thought that much about being a female entrepreneur, but like I just feel like an entrepreneur. But then being part of that community, being invited in there, it was so nice to see other female role models who were further down the road than I am and who had families and seemed to be thriving, but who also shared like the sort of practical advice on how to do it. Because I was very nervous when we were like super excited and happy to be having a baby, but also like what's going to happen to me and Ludenso and my career? Like, how do I juggle all of this? Is it even possible? And then seeing that all the other founders in my cohort, except one, I believe, everyone had kids and they were all really successful founders. It was just so inspiring to me to see that this is possible. So that was one element of the Female EdTech Fellowship. But of course, apart from being females, like they're really, really talented entrepreneurs. They would tell me like sales strategies or like issues with scaling a team or how to handle layoffs, and they would share opportunities of speaking at events. So through the fellowship, I was invited as a speaker for Hold on IQ in Stockholm and for South by Southwest. And so these opportunities wouldn't have been there unless I had been a member of that cohort.
And you also mentioned about you received investment. What was your reason for getting investment?
So we wanted to make our platform more scalable and not do like the type of almost like consultancy that we did with the first publisher. But we couldn't just onboard another publisher without having a scalable platform. So we used it as the first money we got in was to sort of get in more people and start building the platform. And then the second round we did was about internationalization and creating a self-serve platform. So taking it one step further. So that's been super helpful. Like we wouldn't have been where we are today had it not been for those money. And of course also the knowledge and networks that comes through these investors.
And is it difficult finding the right investor?
It's a lot of work. My CEO and co-founder Eirik Wallström is the one who's been sort of leading the rounds, and I've been invited in to sort of share might take more where it's needed on sort of scaling, marketing, sales. But I know he's been really diligent with looking at what type of investor do we want, what kind of help do we need? Because money you can get from a lot of places. You can also get it from grants, or you can focus your time doing more sales. Like, why do we want investors on board, and what do we want them to bring to the table? So I think Eirik has done an amazing job at just networking, talking to other founders, getting recommendations, talking with the investors that looked relevant to us, and then kind of just deciding who to move forward with. And also, of course, tackling some no's, which is not a fun part of that journey. But it's a challenging part of being an entrepreneur if you want to go down the VC route.
Facing no's, I think that's something really challenging that every entrepreneur, salesperson, and a lot of other people have to deal with. How do you handle rejections, no's, false hope, that sort of thing? Because for me, that's the most difficult part. So I'm always curious how other entrepreneurs deal with it.
I think it was a lot harder like the first year or two. And then I think I just got thicker skin. You sort of realize like you can have like these really highs and those bad lows in the same day, and you get emotionally drained if you let it get to you, both parts of it. And so as time goes, it just sort of becomes a more natural day of your life, and you start realizing that it's not about those yeses or nos, it's about the grind, having the grit to just continue working, learning from those no's, figuring out why. Like we always, like if we have a sales conversation and we get a no, then we ask, can we get a few minutes of your time to just talk through why you decided not to move on? And then sometimes we get really interesting insights from those conversations. And often it turns out it's not really a no. It just means not now. Let's talk later. And then we manage to turn those around by listening to the feedback and making changes to our pitch or to our product. I'm reading this book right now called The Mom Test.
Yes.
Which is amazing. It's super fun. And I feel so guilty because I've probably made all the mistakes mentioned in the book. But it's just a healthy reminder of being grateful for getting no's and not going too hard into pitch mode and trying to get people to give you compliments, because that's not what you really need.
Yeah, for sure. It's important to get the right information rather than the information that makes you feel better.
True. Sometimes you need that too, but then you should go elsewhere. That's when you should call your mom.
Yes, that's true. You need to get that information from your mum rather than the prospective customers. How do you think the current education system could be improved, or how could education be improved in general?
Yeah, no, that's a big question to answer. I think one challenge that I hear from talking to teachers is that they want to give sort of personalized feedback and give each student the kind of attention they deserve and the ability to sort of excel at their level. And so I think like if you're a teacher and you have 150 different students in a week because you teach a specific subject, and then like it's not scalable, it's not possible for a teacher. But there are things that teachers do that technology will never be able to. And so I think finding the balance of what should sort of the traditional methods help you with and what should technology allow you to do. So I think AI has massive potential to give students a better learning experience and journey that's tailored to their needs. And the multimedia assets we have at hand now can allow students with different learning preferences or learning difficulties to choose. Like we really see with our solutions in 3D and augmented reality that some students really thrive when being allowed to use a different approach to learning, and we've seen that their grades are improving or that failure rates are decreasing. So that's really something I think we should see a lot more of in education moving forward, just seeing how technology can help while still preserving some of like the deep thinking, critical thinking you gain from reading a printed textbook. I think is something we want to keep. Like we don't want to get rid of everything and change everything, but we want to look at when can technology really help and when do you need to have that sort of, I don't know, Socratic dialogues in a classroom, or just read and think and be mindful and reflect and allow time for contemplation. Yeah, no, I think education is in an interesting stage right now where lots is changing, and I really hope we manage to find the right balance between digital and the traditional side while taking care of our teachers.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's a lot to consider: the teachers, the students, the tech, not moving too far towards tech and losing touch with a lot of things. It makes me think of like gamification. Like nowadays, I see learning's gamified a lot, which can be great because it gets people into learning, but then it can also be bad because we have this idea now that everything should be a game rather than we should learn. So yeah, I
Yeah.
guess that's something that really needs to be balanced.
No, absolutely. And we see gamification not only happening on the learning side, like if you're an Uber driver or you work at Amazon, they will try and gamify your work experience as well to make you feel like you're doing something more enjoyable, while in reality, these developers are using the gamification to, I don't know, save money and retract bonuses from you or something like that. So it's like if you're interested in gamification and how to be critical of it, I would recommend reading You've Been Played by a former developer. I was recommended this book by our partners at Cambridge University Press, and it was such an eye opener and an important reminder to us as developers too, like to not just bringing gamification because it would increase the time spent within our app. Like you really need to think about why. Like ultimately, we want to help students. We want them to increase their understanding and retention. We don't need to measure that through time spent in our app. So yeah, I think gamification is something to be really, really careful with in education, especially with the youngest learners. They're really susceptible to, like, they get so many impressions, and it's hard for them to be critical and to, we kind of need to take care of them for them. And so I think that's also why we see a lot of political shifts happening now where they go like no screen time in schools and so on, because there's been kind of this almost like experiment happening with children for a time now where they just have too much gamification.
It's interesting you remember. That's interesting. You recommend the book You've Been Played. I've never been recommended that, and often when I get recommended books, they're always quite similar. So I'll definitely give that a read. But yeah, I guess it's also for companies like they're trying to balance getting their product out there and getting their product people to click on it and use it, but trying to balance that and being a good product and being honest. And it's like sometimes I'll see the marketing of products like learning apps, and it's like how to become as smart as a CEO and learn in just 10 minutes a day. And there's like a lot of false promises and there's a lot of gamification. It's all like almost unethical practices, but then they're justified because people will say, well, how else can we get people using the app? Or how
Yeah,
else can we get people using it?
very true. It's like when I was at Beth in London now, I met with one of our partners from Apple, and she was comparing this to sort of in America. She was saying that they would kind of seats, butts in the seat was the phrase she used. So sort of a teacher would just look at how many students is here today, and then yay, success. Instead of thinking about sort of what did they learn today. If you do the same with screen time, then I think that can be really bad.
Yeah, that makes me think, I guess a lot of life and business is tracking the right metrics. Like how many problems come from just tracking the wrong metrics, whether it's measuring screen time, measuring butts and seats, measuring just revenue, measuring X, Y, Z, yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think for us, it's been really helpful to have an investor such as Ferd that's so impact driven, because they don't ask us for a ton of different metrics that's not important to our students or to the publishing houses that we work with. Like they are very open to having a dialogue around sort of what do we really want to achieve and how do we measure it, and using sort of a theory of change and those kind of fundamentals of social entrepreneurship while still looking at but how do we make money and scale. So it's a fun balance, and it's nice to work with people who have joined our journey because of the change we want to make.
Yeah, that's great. Great to have an investor like that, because often I hear a lot of horror stories of investors prioritizing growth at all costs and massive returns over, making an impact. So that's good to hear that. And last question, do you have like a favorite quote or best piece of advice you've been given ever? Or a favorite book or just anything? Because for me, I've mentioned it before, it's always like the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. I don't know if you've heard of it. Like that one book really helped me understand business because it just dumbed down everything so much for me. And I was like, wow, this is so insightful. And Yes, I'm just curious if you've got anything similar. Maybe it's a quote or a piece of advice or a book.
I love reading, like I absolutely do. I read every single week and it gives me so much like peace of mind and it helps me think more critically through what I do. But I would actually recommend listening to Freakonomics. It's not entrepreneur specific, but it's just
Yes, I think I've.
I absolutely love that podcast because they invite in a lot of researchers and often economists to share their take on things happening in the world. Like they have a 3 series episodes on fraud in academia. That's of course relevant to what I do. And I just love how they approach problems and think through how to measure things or how to ask the right questions. And it's probably a bit like engineers are approaching problems as well. But here you get to listen to these really knowledgeable people who share perspectives on everything from why we are wearing shoes to how abortion is impacting crime rates in the US. Like it's just very, very interesting topics that you would probably not think of looking at yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really important actually, because I think if you just listen to business podcasts or you just read about business or you just read about one thing, you won't, like you say, you will not be reading about the links between some of the things you mentioned. So it is always really good to listen to things like that because it gives you insights that you'd never get before. But yeah, Ingrid, thank you so much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure to hear about your journey in engineering into entrepreneurship and founding Ludenso and all the great things you and your co-founders are doing. So it was a pleasure to hear, and yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to meet you too, and fun to reflect on these questions that I often don't spend enough time thinking about.